Get us started. My name is Joe Swimmer. I'm the Executive Director of Episcopal Parish Network, and we're really pleased today to have you with us for this conversation about security and your church. And it's a conversation that's about being pastoral in our approach to security. It's how is it that we are both secure and welcoming. And I think that you're going to find this a really fascinating conversation that will be moderated by the provost at our member parish, St. Mark's Cathedral in Minneapolis, Tim. And we're just so pleased to have these panelists with us, pleased to have you with us. There will be a slideshow that I'm going to be running, so there may be a couple of technical hiccups here and there. Be patient with us, but you'll get a recording of it if there's anything, and we'll also send you copies of the PowerPoints afterwards. That's enough words from me for today. So glad you're with us. I'm ready to hand it off to Tim. And thank you all again for joining, and thanks to our panelists for being with us. All right.
Great. Thanks so much, Joe. I appreciate this so much. And thanks for the kind introduction. Again, my name is Tim Kingsley, and I'm a priest and a security consultant, currently serving at St. Mark's Cathedral in Minneapolis. And with over 30 years of experience designing or coordinating security programs in corporate or academic environments, I bring a deep commitment to safety and the well-being of human beings. In 2017, I answered the call to ordain ministry, and that's where faith and service came together for me. In both vocations, people are truly where my heart is at. Safety and security planning is in addition to physical security like doors and locks and barriers, cameras, it's being in relationship with people. To seek and serve Christ in all persons means paying attention and truly seeing others. In a post 9/11 world, we often hear phrases like, if you see something, say something. And while that's well-intentioned, I struggle with it from time to time. It's a crucial question, but what are we looking for? Are we really paying attention to the right things? When our focus is too narrow, or perhaps informed by personal bias or our own lenses of life, we oftentimes have an opportunity of overlooking what truly matters. And in doing so, we may cause harm. With this in mind, I'm honored to introduce a panel of friends and distinguished experts in this field. I'm joined by Tina Roy, former U.S. Marshal and security trainer, who has a career focused in safeguarding communities and empowering others. Rob Allen, a good friend from Minneapolis, representing community security for the Jewish Community Relations Council of Minnesota and the Dakotas, who serves the Jewish community, have a different lens on safety and security than perhaps the Episcopal community, and has dedicated his life to the efforts of fostering safer environments and building resilient communities within the people he serves. And Simon Osmoa, founder of Kingswood Security Consulting, who brings valuable insights to faith security in identifying behaviors and recognizing opportunities for early intervention. Together, our hope is that we spark a meaningful dialogue, paying attention to people, understanding behaviors, finding ways to intervene, building on the knowledge, gifts, and opportunities of the people we work with on a day-to-day in our faith communities, and being truly present and building on relationships with one another to interrupt harm. So with that, I think let's start our panel and presentations with Tina Rowe. Thanks, Tina, for being here today.
That's quite all right. I've looked forward to it. I'm the one that's going to have somebody else advancing the slides, but I want you to think about the fact that my whole background has been local law enforcement and federal law enforcement. And I don't think most people would realize that when we talk, especially about the federal courts, we're talking about almost the church environment where people are going to be there, and we want them to feel like they're part of that environment. But still, we have to be cautious about a lot of things. And so it was amazing to me how I was able to transfer so many things that we applied to the federal court system and the security of, for example, the Oklahoma City bombing trials, right away to church safety and security. Just to say, before I get started, in fact, the slide he's got up right now is the title of or going to have up right now is the title of a class that I usually teach that's called Shared Vigilance. And it's keeping our places of worship, our church, safe and secure every day and all the time. But I started in law enforcement, and I want you to be aware of that so you'll know that there's this bunches of stuff just like you do put all together in what I train about. I started in law enforcement in 1969. I was wearing a little short skirt and high heels, and I carried my little Chief Special revolver in my purse, which was back in the car. So I look at the history of how we've changed the way we look at security for a lot of things, especially for churches, and see that we need to be always be willing to adjust our thoughts, be aware of the environment that we're in, and also be aware of the social environment that we're in. So that's why this all, I think, comes together. But the first thing I wanted to mention before I even get into that is the idea, and you can advance the slide for this one, is the idea that we are a big picture of church security. We often think about this main worship service, but then get the rest of it. Look at how much there is in your church. I mean, probably your church has more things than this has, because we are so much more than the main service. And if we put all of our focus on the main service, we leave out the Tuesday night Bible study and the Thursday night baby shower and the Saturday morning teen get together. And so one of the things I want to do, in addition to what we're talking about today, I just didn't want to miss the opportunity to say, think about your place of worship as if I could act it out, it would be, this is yours, and you have to nurture it, and you have to take care of the people and the building and the processes. And in fact, I talk about the 5 Ps. That's going to be the next slide, as a matter of fact. The 5 Ps that I talk about all the time, it's the people and the places and the processes and the programs and all of the things that we do and the procedures, all the things that we do to have a church run right. Every one of those could be attacked in some way, not maybe by an outside assailant, but in some way. And I want us to keep that in mind as we're talking about this bigger talk today. So I knew that we're focused on something else. I just wanted to get that in. So let's flip to the next slide as we're talking about that. When we're thinking about this big picture that we have, I think the thing that most of us are concerned about is, what if an assailant attacks any part of that, any part of it? What are we going to do? And one of the things that I have often emphasized is the fact that the assailants have the advantage. And in fact, I thought about that a few years back. I was reading some things about how Amazon protects against hackers. And they said the hacker always has the advantage. And so Amazon is perpetually shutting down their operations and starting them up again. And we don't realize it because it's happening so quickly. But they are focused on the fact that the hacker has the advantage. And I believe the assailant has the advantage. And we need to be aware of that. So let's look at some of the advantages that the assailant has. And we'll flip to the next slide for that. What are some of the advantages? Well, the first one is he knows what he's going to do and how he's going to do it and when he's going to do it. So while you're at home getting dressed and taking a shower and talking to the kids and getting things ready, the assailant is getting ready to attack. I mean, that's just the reality. You start reading any article about churches that have been attacked in any way, and you will realize that this was not just spur of the moment, almost never, sometimes, but almost never. It was planned. And so while the people at church were praying or thinking or doing whatever, getting ready in the parking lot, the assailant already knew what was going on and he had plans for it. Here's the second advantage. The assailant is ready for the attack, and he has a weapon either nearby or close in hand or right present, or a device, not necessarily a weapon. So he's ready in that way as well. Let's look at the next advantage. When he attacks, he's the only one that's not shocked and confused and surprised at what's happening, because he's the one doing it and he planned on it happening. And that's why I get so frustrated when people do the armchair quarterbacking about what a church could have done better in an attack. Yeah, you try doing the right thing when you're still in a position of what on earth is going on. It frustrates me when security team people sit back and say they should have done this or they could have done that. That's why it is so important for us to be aware of that advantage that they have, that they're not shocked and they're not surprised because they're the ones doing it. Let's look at the next advantage. And in fact, I've got three clustered together there, but they sort of fit together. I look down occasionally, in case you're wondering. I'm looking down at my own notes just because it helps me see it better. I have reading glasses like many of you all do, and so it's a perpetual issue with that. I'm looking at some of you. Yes, you do have your reading glasses on. I can see that. All right, well, the three that I'm thinking of next is, and this sounds scary, but I'm just saying it. He wants people to get hurt and killed. He's not like us, where if we react, we're worried about hurting other people or killing someone accidentally. No, he wants people to be hurt and killed. Huge advantage. Next advantage, he doesn't need to protect or assist anybody. He doesn't have a child or a mother or a wife or a friend that he needs to jump over and try to protect. He's just ready to be an assailant, that's all. And the third thing that he has as an advantage, this is a big one. He's not disturbed by the sights and the sounds. If he sees blood, that doesn't bother him. If he sees somebody fall down, that doesn't bother him. Now, that's not saying that everybody who's an assailant is a maniacal killer. It doesn't say that. What it says is that once people get into that mode and the adrenaline is running for the assailant just as well as it is for everybody else, things are just happening so quickly that for the person involved with the attack, it's just not something that's registering on them like it is for the rest of us. Here's the next advantage they have when you think about it, is that, and I mention this as we come to the next slide about how can we overcome the advantages, but here's the next thing and the final thing I think that we could say about the advantage that assailants have. I mentioned this the other day when we were talking about, we say we build bird feeders to try to protect against squirrels, and we spend a little bit of time doing that. Squirrels spend 24 hours a day trying to figure out how to get in those. And so the advantage the assailant has is that we have webinars, and we might read a book, and we might read something online. But for the person who is assailant, that doesn't take a lot of training. It just takes a lot of anger or the inability to control an impulse or a desire or a bias. It just sort of comes naturally. So having said those really negative things, but I think if you think about it, you'll see it's true. What is it then we can do to overcome the assailant's advantage? And that's where you all come in. And that's where what Simon has to say and what the other gentleman, forgive me, has to say, the really, really smart and intelligent one, not Simon. Here's what they're going to be talking about too, is that there are ways that we can overcome the advantage. One of the ways, and let me skip this over here so I can see it. One of the ways, of course, is that we can take away their ability to surveil the outside of our building and to know what's going on inside and outside. We can take away the confidence that they have that we're an easy target. It used to be that to put a camera outside a church and to be able to see what's going on outside, especially if we're sitting at home, that would have cost you thousands of dollars. Now, every church can put up cameras that you could literally watch on your iPad or your computer or your phone, anywhere you are. You can take away the ability of some total stranger to sit outside your church and just see what's going on. In Oklahoma, there was the young man that was going to put pipe bombs in churches. When they arrested him before he was able to do anything, he had a list of every church in that town, when their meeting started, when most people showed up, what time the pastors showed up, about how many people were there, what time they left. He had that all laid out because he would spend hours surveilling the churches. We can take that away from them. And as a result, we can take away the confidence that they have that they can just make our church an easy target. My feeling is, I don't know how your church is or where you live or, where you go to work or whatever, but any of us needs to just make it a point when we're on our way to the grocery store or on our way to church or on our way to work, drive around the church and make sure everything's going okay. If you're running an errand, just run down to the church, even if it's a half hour away, and do your little bit to drive around and see if there's anybody checking your church out that shouldn't be happening. It's a way to say, we own this place and we care about it and we're going to keep an eye on it. The next way that we can take away their advantage is that we can take away their ability to prepare outside or in the foyer or in an entry area. And the other thing is we can take away their ability to find unsecured and unmonitored places and ways to get in or to hide. The way we do that, and I know you're going to be talking about a little bit of that later too, but the way we do that is just by being aware of what's going on in the parking lot all the time, at least as much as we can. And to keep in mind that when any churches have been assaulted, people have to get their stuff together outside for the most part, or they come in the foyer and they kind of make sure everything's okay, or they come in the foyer and they head to the men's room and make sure that they've got all the stuff they need, or they walk behind a plant and kind of get ready. And I will tell you, when we're talking about these unsecured doors and so forth, every time I've done a security assessment at a church and found an unlocked door, I hear the same thing, which is, it's usually not like that. We usually have that locked up. Well, we don't usually prop that door open. Well, it was that way. And if I'd have been assailant, I would have taken advantage of it. So we need to be looking at those kinds of things as well. And let me just tell you this right here, since time goes on, you're going to see my email address and my website address. Anybody here can get in touch with me. And I have material that I'll send you. It's absolutely free. I don't follow up. I'm not an entrepreneur about that. And I have material that you might find useful. So wait till you see my email address and when you see my website address and so forth, and just get in touch with me and I will send you some material in addition to the things that I know you can get everywhere else. But I'd like to hear from you and I'd like to send you some material and some thoughts of mine. So do that when you get a chance. The next way we can take away their advantage is that we can take away their ability to enter and be unobserved. Start noticing in your church how often the greeters and ushers are focused on being friendly to the people they know and not necessarily the people that are entering. And if you take somebody that's coming in that seems a little off, a little odd, start noticing. Even the best trained greeters and ushers will back off a little ways because they feel uncomfortable. And I think the purpose of what we're talking about today is those are the people that we want to try to greet more than others and make them feel welcome and make them feel comfortable. But in the process, we can be aware of maybe some undercurrents that we weren't aware of, or something they might have concealed that we wouldn't have seen otherwise. So we're serving both purposes. We're bringing them in, but we're also keeping an eye on them. I always say, I don't like the concept of the sheepdog. I don't like that. I'm not a sheep. I don't need a sheepdog. But if you're thinking about that as a flock, we're the only flock I know of where we invite the wolf in, and if they don't harm us, we invite them back again. And that's what we really kind of want when we're looking at our context, is that we invite people in and we help them assimilate and become part of our group. So there's ways that we can balance all of that. The next way that we can help take away that advantage is to take away their opportunities to hide and to wait someplace. That's why I like to have office doors and classroom doors locked up when they're not in use. We can also take away their ability to harm things without being detected. And by that, I mean, they can't get to children and nobody knows about it. They can't get into our service areas and mess up our electronics or leave a device around some area without us knowing about it. That's an advantage we can take away. We can also, and this is the next one, we can take away their access to vulnerable people and groups. That is not only children, but it's also the elderly. We can take away their access to some of it, like, for example, special needs people that might come and visit our church. Those are all things we want to be focused on as well. we can take away their knowledge of who's going to respond and how are they going to respond and what is their response capabilities. That's why, some churches have security teams. I don't know that any of you all do or that you want them, but churches that have security teams, I always say, have some people be obvious so that people can go to them for help, and have the others not be obvious so that there isn't a ready picture of who's going to be responding here. And then the last way that we can take away from the advantage of the assailant is, and this is where you can have a role, whatever your role is, you can talk with people about this, is to take away their ability to catch everybody off guard. There has to be some people who are watching during the church service and don't have their heads bowed in prayer, or aren't so focused on the Lord's Supper or whatever sacraments that we have. They're focused on the whole picture. And that may swap out from service to service, but I think we need something like that so that we can make sure that we're looking at things while it's going on and we won't be caught off guard. And then the last way, of course, is we take away control of the situation and his ability to sustain an attack. The thing is that the assailant has control when they first start, but we can take away that control and regain it for ourselves, and we can stop the sustained attack. And I've got some material, you've got great material, I'm sure, about weapons and so forth, but I like for us to talk about what can individual members do that can distract somebody, throw them off, and help protect us. So my message about everything, in fact, let's flip to that last slide while we're doing it. My message about everything is that we need to be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. We need to be thinking of, this is my church family. This is my church home. I love it as much as I love my own home, and I want to protect it, and I want to protect the people in it. But I want to be able to have guests come in and have them feel part of our family and join our family down the line. So how can I balance that? And I really do think, and I believe it, it takes the big picture approach. And it's what Simon talks about when he will be talking about a culture of safety and security. I wish I would have said that. And when Simon's not around, I say I developed that term, but I didn't. But that's exactly what we need, is a culture of safety and security every day, all the time, so that we can take away that assailant advantage that is going to be there as just part of life and part of the way things work. But when we love our church and we love our church family, we can protect against a lot of that. So that's sort of my concept for the time. And I like to mention that as a way to say, be sure you get my information and get in touch with me and let me know if there's any other way that I can help you. So now I'll turn that back.
Tina, thank you so much. I mean, the safety and security and building resilience within your system 24/7 while embracing radical hospitality is at the core of what we do. And I'm so thankful for your insights. I'm so thankful for your background. All are welcome at our table. And we come from an approach of seeking grace first and identifying the opportunities for harmful intent within meeting that person where they're at. So thank you so much, Tina. We are honored by your presence today, and I'm so thankful for you joining. I'd like to switch gears here now a little bit to Rob Allen and ask him to take the screen. Rob serves at the Jewish Community Relations Council here in Minnesota and serves North Dakota and South Dakota as well. Rob, will you tell a little bit about where you come from?
I forgot to unmute. I'm so embarrassed. All right. My name's Rob Allen. I come to Minnesota JCRC. I've been here for about 3 years. And my background is law enforcement. Was an executive in the Minneapolis Police Department and then 2 different sheriff's offices before retiring. So this is my 4th job after retirement. I'm not, as it turns out, good at retiring. So the Jewish community, Tim, is and everybody is a challenging community to do security in, as you can imagine, given the tenor of the world events and the tenor of anti-Semitism, which has been present for hundreds and hundreds of years. Interestingly, on October 7th, when Israel was attacked, I was in Barcelona, and at the very moment that we started getting our texts going off that Israel was under attack, an architect who was giving the tour that we were giving asked any of us if we knew what this beautiful building was. And you know, it looked like a generic Gothic building in Jerusalem, or in Barcelona. And she said, it's a crime that you don't know what this building was. It was the central synagogue of Barcelona until the pogrom of 1391, which was followed by the pogrom of 1492. And you know, the Jews were chased out of Barcelona. And just as she was saying that, we started getting text messages that Israel is under attack. And so it's not a new thing to the Jewish community. The United States, 2 to 3% of the population, about 2.5% of the population is Jewish. 67% of hate crimes based on religious bias in the United States occurred against the Jewish community last year. So it's something we're used to doing. On the other hand, we are like the Christian community, and when I say we, they've adopted me. But we're a community that wants people to know us. We want our congregants to feel comfortable coming to shul. We want our congregants, we want our community to know who we are, that we're not practicing sacrifices during synagogue services. So we want people to come in. We want that abundant hospitality that Reverend Kingsley mentions. And so how do you do that in a threat environment? And I'll briefly describe sort of the threat to the Jewish community. The most common one, frankly, that we have is we get a lot of weird emails, weird mail in the US, you know, the postage stamp, that kind of mail, and a lot of weird phone calls. The vast majority of them turn out to be proselytizers who are trying to prevent the Jews from going to hell. If I have a message, you know, if you have people who are thinking of doing that, sending notes, and please don't. But a lot of them are, you know, we can determine that they're, you know, grammatical errors and that kind of stuff, but that the people are basically well-meaning. They're not really setting out to hurt people. They're trying out of maybe a misplaced belief that they're helping people by sending these letters. But that's the most common one, and they're a relatively low risk group. The second group that we deal with are sort of the generic anti-Semites, and I group them with the people who are generally angry at God. And what's interesting about this group is that when we get these people, often living with serious mental illnesses and unable to find help for it, if I reach out to colleagues in the Christian community or the Muslim community, I will often get, oh yeah, we had him. Reverend Kingsley and I have dealt with probably a half dozen individuals who have shown up both at our synagogues and their churches in the past. And so our approach to that often is trying to get them the mental health care that they need, rather than sort of through criminal or traditional security practices with them. Oftentimes they're people who just need mental health services and that kind of stuff. The more disturbing groups are sort of racially and ethnically motivated violent extremists. I've met a few of these people. I don't like them. But what's interesting about them is that they're mostly sort of feckless people. They probably aren't going to do the attacks. But what concerns me is that they motivate those lone angry individuals who do commit the attacks. And so if you look at the guy who shot up the synagogue in Pittsburgh, he didn't post much online, but he was heavily influenced by these people who did post you know, racially and ethnically hateful stuff online. He was a believer that the Jews were behind the immigration crisis in the United States. and that the Jews, he read about an organization called HIAS, the Hebrew Immigration Aid Society, and felt that they were responsible for immigrants coming into the country and taking jobs that he would have preferred to have instead of the sort of menial jobs that he had. That's the concern we have. Those are the attacks that we've had in Pittsburgh and Poway, California, and so forth. We also have some concern about international terrorism. The attack in Texas, where there was a hostage shaking at a synagogue in Colleyville, Texas, was a Pakistani national, and technically is international terrorism. He was more of a person living with a mental illness, probably, and had sort of delusions about the conspiracy of the Jews to persecute him and that kind of stuff. But we have also had cases where we know that foreign nationals have targeted Jewish institutions. So it's an area we're concerned at. We look for, and Tina did a great job of sort of explaining the pathway to violence without using that term. She talked about individuals who are sort of probing and researching institutions. And so we take a lot of steps to identify those people. We use a lot of physical security things. I have license plate readers at the majority of my synagogues. And so I know if somebody outside the community is visiting more than one place and maybe looking at things that way. And we monitor social media for people who are displaying violent ideation towards Jewish communities, that kind of stuff. So that's part of it. But the main thing I want to focus on, and I'll just show you, I started 3 years ago. I have not done well at reducing anti-Semitic incidents, unfortunately. So I'm trying not to take it personally, but the amount of serious anti-Semitic incidents that we're dealing with is growing rapidly. So what we try and convince our congregants at our synagogues and the staff at our schools is that they have the tools to do this. Their mere presence is a tool to prevent serious things from happening. There's also physical security, and they can train and exercise in what to do if something serious happens and how to prepare yourself. So we do talk about physical security. I won't go into what these slides mean, but we talk about physical security. The training we do comes in a number of areas. The first one is we train ushers and greeters to welcome people. And if you remember my first slide, it showed meerkats, and I'll talk about meerkats as sort of the analogy of how we do ushering and greeting. The Hebrew word for that is hakuna matata. That's what my Jewish colleagues tell me. I'm not sure they're telling me the truth, but anyway, we'll talk a little bit about that in the usher greeter training. We also spend extensive time on first aid training. If something happens, and by the way, anytime I do training at a synagogue, I say, what's the most dangerous part about coming to shul today, or visiting any Jewish institution? And people stop and think for a while, and usually somebody gets it right away. And it's driving to shul or synagogue. That's the most dangerous thing they're going to do, but we don't think twice about driving, right? So I always try and put this into context. The chances of being harmed in an attack are virtually nil, but they will happen somewhere in the United States. So if all of us are trained in what to do if an attack occurs, then the likelihood of attacks in the United States being successful from a terrorist point of view are much smaller. So that's why we do the training. The usher grader training, Reverend Kingsley and I actually both serve on the board of directors for the crisis intervention team. This is the group that trains public safety in how to identify people who might be living with a mental illness, who might just be odd, or might have harmful intent. And it's the body language and so forth that does that. The really effective part of that training is we use professional actors who have studied attackers. They have studied people living with mental illness. They talk to people who have lived with mental illness and say, what's it like when you're in crisis? What works at de-escalating the situation? What doesn't work? And we share that information with ushers and greeters, and it's very effective. We also do traditional sort of run, hide, fight training. We call it different congregations call it different things. Alice, 3 Echo, so forth. We offer behavioral threat evaluation and response courses. This is an 8-hour course. It's phenomenal. It helps you recognize people who may pose a threat to you. It is free training. Don't ever pay for it. National Center for Biomedical Research and Training at LSU offers it. The Department of Homeland Safety, DHS, Department of Homeland Security offers it, and it's free. And if you need to know where to find it, I'll have my contact information in the chat. You can find it somewhere. And then we do enhanced security training, keeping campuses safe, train the trainer, and that type of stuff. We really focus on the role of the usher greeter, though, and we use that analogy of the meerkat. We want people to be welcoming. Welcome to our congregation. Hey, I don't recognize you. Have you been here before? You know, what brings you to Bob's synagogue today? And we have have a conversation with people and recognize people may be nervous, and that's cool, but also try and recognize signs of people practicing deception, and that may be a warning, and then what to do if you see that. So we tell people, be alert, be welcoming, be alert, and be curious are sort of the guide rules that we use. And then we also spend a fair amount of training. Okay, what if somebody doesn't meet the norm? How are we going to manage this situation? And we have a wide variety from professional security to security volunteers, and really extensive security teams at some of the bigger synagogues. So that's my contact information. Tim told me to be brief. I tried, and that's what I have to say about that. Tim, you're muted. You did it too.
Thank you so much. And what I'm learning is that we're so passionate about what we do. We need a lot more than 10 minutes to do what we to talk about what we're doing. No, this is true. I got one quick question, and then I want to move to Simon because I want him to talk a little bit about empowering people to connect with others and what does it mean to be radically hospitable and given permissions to go greet. But real quick, I know in the Jewish community you have security apparatus or security groups. Can you quickly tell us a little bit about professional security teams vis-a-vis small or large volunteer security or safety teams or community greeters? Could you just give us an overview of your experience?
Yep. I will say that if you have the resources, you're always better using professional security people and try and use the same people over and over again who recognize the patterns of the institution. My caution about using volunteer security teams is this: it's not fair to them, right? I go to church to be in the present, well, to listen to the sermon, it depends who the preacher is, but I go to be in the presence of Holy Spirit to commune with my fellow congregants, right? That's why I go to church. If I am being alert and paying attention to the things around me, I'm not paying attention to what the preacher's saying, which, sometimes is okay. But I'm not fully there spiritually. And so it's not a good thing. So that's my caution about using those volunteer security teams. If you do, it's better to have a larger team. So not everybody has to be there every week. And that's my recommendation. The risk of burnout is very high with security teams if you have the same people doing that every week in and week out.
Perfect. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it. As the preacher, I don't take any offense by your statements. Simon, I'd like you to go and tell us a little bit about your background, tell us a little bit about Kingswood Security Consulting, and, giving us permission to engage people, I think is very powerful. Thank you, Simon. Simon, are you with us?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if you were seeing my screen, so I'm just doing it again. Bear with me a second. Let me know. Can you see my screen? You can?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yes, we can.
What I'm going to talk about just for sort of 10, 15 minutes is around connecting the dots and the role of threat assessment in houses of worship. And it only seems like yesterday I met Tina Rowe when I was working at Mall of America in Minnesota as the head of counterterrorism there. And that's where I first got connected to Tina, and it's also where the Lord first called me in what I call security ministry. I was talking at a sports conference at Disney, and a church reached out via a large police department and said, "Simon, we know you're a security expert. We know you're a Christian. Can you help this church?" And I remember thinking about it, and there was two things really that the Lord put on my heart. One, I was like, why does a church need my help? And second, when I went there, he really said to me, "Simon, I gave you the skills and attributes to help keep my churches safe." And over a decade later, I've now touched thousands of churches across the US. I've written 2 Amazon best-selling books on church security, and it's a real blessing to be with here with you today, talking a bit about church safety and security, because it's very different than when I'm talking to the secular world. But what I'm going to focus on is around the pathway to violence and threat assessment. So I'm a father of 2 sons, 14 and 11. And perhaps you're like me, a parent of a young child, or you could be a grandparent or an uncle, whatever it may be. I think we're all concerned about the safety and security when we are in public, particularly around active assailant, as Tina mentioned. There is this pathway to violence that these assailants go through. And if we go back most probably 5, 10, 15 years, someone would say, well, Simon just snapped. He just snapped one day, and he went into the church, he went into the school, he went into his place of work and carried out this deadly attack. But now we look at threat assessment and the pathway to violence a little bit differently. And we agree that there is this pathway, there is these pre-indicator behaviors, as Rob spoke about, but all these individuals show us before. So I want to start off with a few myths and facts about threat assessment. So the first thing people often say is, well, violence is unpredictable. These people just snapped. And as I mentioned, we agree now that there is this pathway to violence. People don't just wake up one morning and say, today I'm going to go to my school. Today, I'm going to go to my church. Today, I'm going to go to my place of work and carry out this deadly attack. We agree that they no longer do this. There is this pathway. People often say, well, there's no way to prevent violence. Maybe it could be the sort of the political challenges, you might say, between the Democrats and the Republicans on gun violence, and say, well, there's nothing that we can do. How do we really prevent this? How do we stop guns and firearms getting into the wrong hands? How do we stop mental illness? So some people might say, well, there's no way to prevent violence. So what should we do? Well, there's always pre-incident behaviors. There's always actions to tell us that this person is on the pathway to violence. So there are things that we can do to prevent this violence. And perhaps there's some people just say, well, Simon, this is a mental health problem. We've been having this not only here in the US, but globally for many years. We haven't been tackling the mental health problem. And perhaps that's the reason why we are here. Well, there's many stresses that people have in their lives outside of mental illness that lead them on this pathway to violence, and ultimately leads them walking into their place of work, their house of worship, or their school to carry out one of these deadly attacks. And the last thing people often say is, well, Simon, we're a small church. We don't have the resources to start a threat assessment team. Where you can start with one person. One person can recognize someone's behavior. One person can lean into a challenging conversation. One person can put their arm around someone and say, Simon, it looks like you're struggling right now. How can I help you? So there's some myths and facts that we have around threat assessment. So I mentioned there is this agreed pathway to violence, that mass shooters, we use the term active assailants. There is this pathway to violence, and that always starts with the idea of the manifestation. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Sutherland Springs mass shooting from 2017, where 26 people tragically lost their lives. One of those was a 14-year-old who was the pastor's daughter. There's this idea, this manifestation, that they want to go out and carry out this deadly attack. The next thing they have to do is identify and mark their target. This church, the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs, this is where my pain and anguish, they are going to be the target of my deadly attack. That most often they will come and attend surveillance. Rob Allen spoke about this, some of the positive hospitality that we can do. The data shows us We're not talking MI5 and James Bond are in the movies, but these people will do a form of surveillance. They will attend the location before they carry out a deadly attack. The reason being, they may have not been to the location before. They need to learn the location. So this isn't necessarily hiding in doorways and hiding behind bushes. These people will hide in plain sight, but the data tells us they have come to our places of worship before and carry out a form of surveillance. Then they'll go and plan their attack. They might not have the firearm, they might not have the weapon. They need to go away and do their planning and preparation. Then they'll practice their plan and then they'll carry out their plan. This is the pathway to violence. And we saw this during the 2017 shooting at the First Baptist Church. The assailant there was had suffered trauma, was suffering from mental illness. He had a history of domestic assault against his partners. He was in an argument with his soon-to-be mother-in-law. That's why he chose the First Baptist Church in Sutherland Springs. A week before the deadly attack, he went there dressed in dark clothing. He was so suspicious that someone actually wanted to search him because they felt uneasy around his company. A neighbor reported post the incident from 8 o'clock every morning. He was practicing his firearm. There was his planning. Then he went to a church one Sunday morning and killed 26 people. One of those was the pastor's 14-year-old daughter. So there is this pathway to violence, as I mentioned, that we see. The advantage that we have in a house of worship, knowing that we welcome all individuals, we greet all individuals, and we want to lead them closer to our faith and the Lord and Savior, is that there's points during this pathway to violence where we actually see intervention points. So we won't necessarily know their ideation, their manifestation, they're going to choose this church. We won't know that they've marked our target, our church as a target, but we will know when they come to our church, as Rob Allen spoke about, when they might ask questions. This is where we can greet them with our strong customer service. Welcome, what brings you here today? Does someone fit outside the contextual norm of our environment? Not much based on their ethnicity or race, but they're outside of baseline to our environment. That is what we're going looking for in their behaviors. We will see them when they do a surveillance. We won't see them when they plan to attack because they might go home and prepare. They might need a firearm to do these other things. But we will then see them again when they come and practice their plan, trying to get in rooms that are restricted, being in private areas of our house of worship. And again, we'll see them when they carry out their plan, the execution. So in this pathway to violence, we will see the surveillance, we will see the rehearsal, and we will see the execution. And what we're looking for there are behaviors that are outside of baseline to our environment. Ethnicity, race does not matter. We're looking for behaviors that are outside the baseline. As human beings, God gave us free will, and it's generally that free will which will catch us out by our human behaviors. So when we look at modern day threat assessment, we now ask this question. I would encourage you to ask this question in your house of worship. Does the situation pose a threat? Not did the person make a threat? And Tina spoke about the Monday morning quarterback. And it's very easy to look back at these incidents and pick them to pieces and find the holes. However, what we do know is that learning from the past helps us protect and secure our future. And we saw this again in the Sutherland Springs mass shooting. A week before the deadly attack, his behavior was so unusual that someone searched him. We know that he was in this argument with his mother-in-law. He chose that church because of that dispute that he was in. If we'd perhaps asked the question, does the situation pose a threat, and not did the assailant make a threat, the situation may have been very different. Now, there is another British American here in Minnesota, where I reside, called Dr. James Densley. He is the co-founder of an organization called the Violence Project, and they have researched every mass shooting in America from 1966 to the current day. And at the time of recording this webinar, I believe there's around 189 mass shootings, which fits the FBI classification of 3 or more people killed. Their research was extensive. It was groundbreaking. It's believed to be some of the best ever conducted. They had unprecedented access to mass murderers, to their families, to court papers. And what they found is that all these mass assailants all had four things in common in their backgrounds. They had all suffered severe trauma and abuse. They had been sexually abused. There was rape in their family. There was just severe human brokenness. All these assailants in some way were in crisis, and they were suicidal either at the time of carrying out their deadly attack or leading up to their deadly attack. The next thing that all these assailants have in common is there is a script and validation that they are following. These mass assailants go on the internet, they become radicalized, they follow what other mass assailants have done before. Each time they are trying to get one bigger. If someone has done 65 mass murders, they want to get to 70. There is a script that they are following. They are researching other mass shooters. What these assailants all had in common is the validation. They are seeking belonging. This person recognizes who I am. This person sees me. This person would recognize who I am, and this is what they did. They went in and shot up their church. They went in and shot people at their school. I must do the same thing. There is a script that these people are following. They're researching online. They are seeking validation for their actions, and tragically, in today's modern world, they are finding it. And then the final one is very difficult for us to talk about today. All of them had access and means to firearms. Again, we get into the political debate here around firearms control. So we have the pathway to violence where we see the surveillance, we see the rehearsal and execution, and we have these intervention points. As a house of worship, we also have the opportunity to prevent these mass shooters, because the very things that we are seeing here on the screen, trauma and abuse, someone who is in crisis, someone who is suicidal, someone who is seeking validation, someone who is seeking a greater meaning than themselves. These are the very people that the Lord has called us to save. So when people say, what can we do to stop mass murders in the US? Perhaps as a house of worship and as a Christ follower, we need to slow down. We need to listen. We need to understand, because all these mass murderers have these four things in common. And that is what the Lord is calling me to do as a Christ follower, is to lean into these difficult conversations. What we also see that the data is telling us is there is a term called leakage. Leakage means that these assailants have told someone before, I intend to carry out a deadly attack, or their behaviors or words or writings have said, here is what I'm going to do. And you look at the data on the screen here, 44.1%. And as I mentioned, this is one of the largest researches into mass shootings. They had unprecedented access. 44.1% of all these mass shooters, of which has been 189 to the present day from 1966, almost half of those told someone what they were going to do before they carried out their deadly attack. Again, I would challenge you as a Christ follower, lean into those difficult conversations. Simon, I see that you are struggling. How are you doing? Simon, you don't seem to be yourself right now. What can I do to help you? We have to lean into those difficult questions. There are so many human behaviors which are telling us that this person's on the pathway to violence, and we're seeing through the pathway to violence, the cycle, and we're seeing through the four things that these have in common, we have these intervention points. So what can I leave you with here today after telling you about a very complex issue? And Rob might not like what I'm going to say here, because when I was at Rule of America, their behavior detection program was based off an Israeli threat detection program. And then when I started at Mall of America, they used to have a term called security interviewing. And what I quickly realized, and what the attorneys loved about me, is that I reduced our lawsuits by about 64%, it was, I believe, in my first year. And those lawsuits were by people that were stopped and spoken to in the Mall of America, and they might not have liked their interaction, And they made a formal complaint saying that they were being stereotyped, if there was bias towards them or someone had discriminated against them. And I was able to drop the lawsuit significantly. Now, how did I do that? Now, I inherited an Israeli program, and I quickly realized we're not Israel. There's a lot of brokenness in America for sure, but we're not Israel. We don't have a lot of the troubles that Israel has. So I very much diluted the program we used to have, and I changed it from security interviewing to now what I call conversational interviewing. And this is what I teach at How's the Worship across the country. And Tina might not remember this, but over a decade ago, Tina helped me with forming this idea around conversational interviewing. So what does that mean? It means that I'd encourage you to ask questions, but avoid key questions. And some of those things are the closed questions, like you might hear the movies the law enforcement ask. Was the car red? Leading question. They're only looking for one answer. Would you like a cup of coffee? Closed question. There's one answer. Would you like to go to Caribou? Closed question. There's one answer. So with conversational interviewing, we're just going to ask what I call open door questions. Open door questions are what build rapport. They lead for us to collecting data. And then we can use the instincts that the Lord gave us to ascertain, is this person here with criminal intent or have they come with good intentions? We know that by asking questions. So we're going to ask the who, what, where, when, why, and how questions. And when I was at Mall of America, I don't get my hair cut there anymore. And they've changed their tone slightly. But when I first moved to America, I used to get my hair cut at Great Clips, and depending where you are in the US, you might not know Great Clips, but it's an American barber's chain. And I would walk in, and they would always say, "Welcome to Great Clips. What brings you here today?" And perhaps you're calling into the church, used to work in sales. This is a great tactic. I was stood in the barbers with my big afro, and they would look at me and they would say, "Welcome to Great Clips. What brings you here today?" I was stood inside a barber's, and clearly the question was obvious. However, they asked me an open question because they wanted to build rapport and they wanted me to signal to them why I was there. So I would say, "I'm here to get a haircut." They say, "That's great. We can help you. Let's get you checked in." It's about building rapport. When you go to McDonald's, perhaps you might hear the same thing. "Welcome to McDonald's. How can I help you today?" You stood inside McDonald's. The answer to the question is most probably obvious. You want food. However, this question is designed, someone has to answer this question. So what I'd encourage you to do today is try to remove those closed questions and ask the open door questions: the who, what, where, when, why, and how. Welcome to Westwood Community Church. What brings you here today? So as I close out in my message, I just really want to say to you that the people who are carrying out these deadly attacks are often the same individuals that the Lord is calling us to protect. And the reason that we can find those individuals is that we lead into these challenging conversations and we ask them open questions because we're inquisitive. We want to find them, we want to help them and lead them closer to the Lord. So we're going to ask for who, what, where, when, and why questions. That is how you conduct conversational interviewing from a position of grace, a position of faith, and welcome people to your faith community. So I just want to leave you with one free resource that we have. My email is at the top there, team@kingswoodsc.com, if you'd like to learn some more about these concepts. But one of the free things that my team do, we've done this now for around 2.5 years. If you go to worshipsecurity.org, on the main homepage, we put out a 7 to 8 page PDF every week of church crimes across the US in houses of worship. There's financial crimes, sexual crimes. We have crimes outside of the US, and we've done all the research for you. We've put all these together in a weekly PDF, and if you sign up, it gets delivered straight to your email, and then people use this to see what is going on in their local area, and they use it to help share within their community. So I'm hoping in the sort of a short time that I had that has helped you in some way. And Tim, I will pass it back over to you.
Oh, thank you so much, Simon. One quick question I have. I want to honor everybody's time, but it's been burning with me a little bit as you've been talking about conversational interviewing. everybody doesn't feel comfortable walking up to someone they don't know and just being so open to say, what brings you to St. Mark's Episcopal Cathedral today? In your experience, what does it look like to start that conversations in your communities around conversational interviewing? Where does it begin?
Yeah, and I'm pretty sure that Tina and Rob will echo this, but it's very easy to watch the news, and every day there's gun crime, every day there's these scary things going on. But really, we still live in a very safe culture. We still live in a very safe environment. It's very easy to feel that the whole world is bad and against us. And so once you change your mindset in that way, Tim, what I would say to people is lean into that person, be inquisitive, and say, this is a person that I might lead closer to the Lord today. This could be someone who's down on their luck. This could be someone who's going through a divorce. This could be a person who's struggling financially. This is a person who's just asking those difficult questions surrounding, is there even a God? And if so, I don't feel this person in my life. So I would change your mindset and say, this isn't a bad person in front of me. The data is showing that we still live in a safe environment. How can I save this person and learn more about who they are as to where they are in their faith journey? So really the answer is, Tim, is to encourage people to find the people that the Lord is calling us to save, and you will see the blessings that come in your world and the great conversations. And like we all say as Christ followers, you never know whether that one conversation you've had with someone has changed the path of their life, because it could be a year, 2 years down the line where the Lord gives them another nudge. So lean into these conversations, find those people that you can lead to Christ. And as I sit here in my home, the world is scary, yes, but we still live in a very first world country where crime and disorder is a small percentage. So I don't know if Tina or Rob want to say more about that, but that would be my stance, Tim.
Thank you very much, Simon. And again, I want to honor everybody's time. I'm looking at the participants, and we had a great showing here today. I'm so thankful for Tina, for Rob, for you, Simon, for taking the time to be with us to talk about this conversation. We know and we believe in our hearts that people are showing up seeking grace and don't have harmful intent. But if we're brave enough to identify what needs to be present before violence can exist, as we're greeting the stranger, we can address, confirm, or refute suspicious or behavior indicators. I'm so thankful for you all. I guess I'll turn it back over to Episcopal Parish Network, and thank you very much.
Thank you all. We're so grateful to have you participating, and we look forward to having everybody on a future digital workshop. Rob, Simon, Tina, and Tim, thanks so much. Everybody have a great day.